Hi and welcome on behalf of Quebec Association for Sustainable Economies. Here we have today Dr. Mathis Wackernagellel, co-creator of the ecological footprint concept and founder and president of Global Footprint Network. Mathis, could you tell us about the ecological footprint and the calculation, please?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. So the ecological footprint is a very simple accounting framework. It compares how much nature we have compared to how much we use. And it does it by recognizing that all life, particularly animal life, is competing for what Earth can renew. That's the most limiting factor materially, also for the human economy. We think sometimes fossil fuel is the most limiting, but actually much more limiting is not how much is on the ground, which is limited, but how much we can burn, because there's limited capacity of the biosphere to absorb. So there's this competition for ecological production, and ecological production happens in surface areas. So we can just compare how much area is there that is ecologically productive, because every country, like Hungary, is a farm. You could say it's a big farm. So how big is this farm in surface, but also in its productivity? So how much do you have? And then you can also trace everything you do back to how much area is necessary to provide that service. For example, you may live in a house and that takes space. So you use timber or wood, that takes space. You eat carrot, that takes space to produce. You emit CO2, that takes space to absorb. We can use more timber that is being renewed. That means we then deplete the assets like the forest, or we can fish more than fish is being regenerated. That means we deplete the fish stock, or we can emit more CO2 than the biosphere can absorb. And then also we kind of fill up the sink of the atmosphere, etc. All these things are ways how we can overuse. So we can compare, like with money. With money, we can compare how much do I earn, how much do I spend. The same thing we can do with ecological resources, not in money, but in physical terms. How much nature do you have? Like how much ecologically productive space is available on the planet or in Hungary or in your region? How much do you use for yourself? That's the whole basic idea. Very simple. Even primary students can understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. And could you explain us about the One Planet concept, please?
Yeah. So obviously it is first you do the accounting to find out how the situation looks like. And what we find is that we're using about 15,000 data points per country and year to do kind of global analysis. We do that now with York University and Further. So to do these accounts every year. And so you can kind of look backwards again and see with the best data from the UN, what does it tell us? It shows that since 1970, humanity uses more than what Earth can renew. And that now we are at the level of about 1.75 Earth. It means like we use the resources 75% faster than they renew. And we can do that for some time because there's some stock that we can deplete, but we're already at a very critical stage. Also, for example, from a climate perspective, it's we overused that sink. So we are at the rate of 75% higher. Now, how many planets would it be useful to use? What would be the ideal budget? If you use the entire budget of the planet, there's not much space left for other species. For other wild species, we are one wild species, and there are many other wild species also need space. Some ecologists like E.O. Wilson, who kind of was one of the leading thought leaders of the biodiversity research. He's now already over 90, but he suggests that maybe using half the planet's capacity would be good for maintaining about 85% of the biodiversity we have. So that's kind of the budget. So that's what One Planet can provide. And the idea of One Planet prosperity is quite simple, is to say, we need to choose. The One Planet doesn't go away. So the big choice really is between One Planet prosperity and One Planet misery. Doesn't seem to be a very, very difficult choice.
No.
But we do as if it was for some strange reason. But if you want to set that goal as well, you need obviously tools. You need to understand how much do you use, how much do you have, and then you can manage that in a similar way as you manage financial resources. Some people think by thinking about resources, you are a Malthusian. Malthusian has a strange name, and my name, Mathis, sounds a bit like Malthus. And I would just like to point out doing accounting is actually anti-Malthusian. You don't let the resources become your fate, so you actually manage them, and you can take the future into your hands. If you just ignore our resource dependence, our resource use, and it's easy to ignore because the prices for resources for many strange reasons are extremely low, compared to how significant they are for us. Like, we can go into reasons, economic reasons why, but it doesn't give us a signal to tell us why we're in overshoot. Well, as we are in massive overshoot, and as our whole city infrastructure depends so incredibly on resources, and we cannot switch that infrastructure from one day to the other. Suddenly it doesn't need it. Your trams in Budapest will not run without resources. They'll just
That's
be
right.
standing there, and the houses will not be warm with that resource and will not eat with that resources. So anyhow, so the resource situation is quite significant. By managing it well, we maintain the value of our assets, like our cities, our trams, of everything, our industrial machineries, of everything. So everything depends on something we don't value economically very well. So being able so resource security, managing resource security allows you to take much more control of your own future. And that's what we're saying. So it's not about saying, oh, we're lost, or it's not possible. On the contrary, we can. It's just not a bit surprising that we don't.
Yes, thank you. Why is it important to go further than neutralization?
Climate change is quite a prominent topic, obviously. And it's an important one, it's a big one. And still, it's just a symptom of an underlying dynamic that ecology is called overshoot. Overshoot means when you use more than what the ecosystems regenerate. And when you do that, you deplete the underlying ecosystem that feed you. And then it leads to often that the population is not able to maintain itself and gets pulled down again. So it's kind of the idea of carrying capacity that allows population to thrive. And if they overuse it, it kind of weakens them. And so it builds kind of this balancing system. So there's a larger context for climate change. It's basically our metabolism, our biological metabolism, meaning it's like me as a person, I have a metabolism. I eat, but I not only eat, I use also heat. I use cotton for my clothes, etc. So the metabolism is broader than just food. That our metabolism collectively as humanity has become very, very large, or too large, compared to what Earth can renew. As we said, like 1.75 Earth is a bit large compared to the planet. And so the symptoms are climate change, but it goes in all different directions. And we use now fossil fuels as a substitute for many biological inputs. So for example, we use a lot of synthetic fibers for our clothes. So fossil fuels used for that, obviously to warm ourselves rather than using wood. But also it enables us to transport things further, so we can go further to harvest biological resources and operate chainsaws or whatever, or fishing boats. So fossil fuels also amplifies our ability to access more biological resources. So all that leads to kind of an amplification of in all dimensions. So it's not a coincidence that we have climate change at the same time as we have water problem, pollution problem, soil loss, deforestation, etc. These are not independent occurrences. They're all symptoms of the same driver. So by addressing this driver, this underlying driver, your chances to actually successfully manage the issue is much, much higher. So it doesn't make the problem more difficult. It makes it actually simpler by looking at the whole thing. Because if we move out the fossil fuel use and then just move the pressure somewhere else, we're not gaining. So it's not, so yes, we need to move out of fossil fuel use, and through that reduce our CO2 emissions. And fossil fuel is a big part of the excess CO2 emissions. It's not the only one. Also cement production, for example, or through land use changes, etc. So there are other sources as well, but it's a very significant one. So fossil fuel is a big thing to look at, and we need to move out of it. But we need to move out of it very carefully in the way that we shouldn't destroy the other thing. We have to. Carefully may sound we shouldn't go fast. No, we have to go fast, but also very thoughtfully, not to make the problem even bigger. So that's why we believe kind of thinking about the one planet budget and how much of the planet we want to use and how much we have available, for example, in Hungary, compared to what you already use in some ways. is quite significant. If you go to data.footprintnetwork.org, you can travel the world without any risk of COVID because just a map, and you can click on every country and see what's their trend and situation. How much do they have compared to how much they use? Does Hungary have more biocapacity per person than the world or less? How much does it take to support a Hungarian? I won't tell you. I want you to get a little bit of an appetite to go and look at data.footprintnetwork.org and see how's Hungary doing? How's France doing? How is Zimbabwe doing, for example? How's Brazil doing? We think in the end, that's like in a world of massive overshoot, because the market doesn't react, the impact will be disruption, not soft adjustments. And those economies that are not prepared for that change will have much more difficulties to operate well. So it's not so much how much resources cost today. If you think, perhaps a silly example, it's more complex and more nuanced than that I'm telling, but you may have heard of Cape Town nearly running out of water, a large city not having enough water. And they didn't pay that much for water. Probably they still don't pay that much for water overall. But if they don't have water, the value of the city is much, much less. I mean, it's plunging nearly to zero because you cannot really operate a city without water. So it's not so much what's the cost of resources now, but what's the value of your assets, your cities, your country, your industry, your everything, without having adequate access to resources. And how quickly can you adjust your country to that predictable future? Because it seems to us that the speed at which we can adjust our cities, for example, our infrastructure, is slower than the speed at which the future is coming towards us. So that means we're already a little bit late in the race. It's not about, it's about so distant in the future. No, it's actually quite close. And there's no scientific model that says actually we could avoid runaway climate change if we still use fossil fuels by 2050. Most would say, wow, we need to be out of fossil fuel use well before 2050. Everybody born after 1985 for sure will still be in the workforce by 2050. And some of them are like 36 years old now, so it's kind of, so there's not that far away. And it's a massive transformation, but which also comes with opportunities, obviously. I mean, the opportunity is we can maintain the value of our assets. And if we just sit back and wait for others and believe we have to wait for others to act first, we cut into our own arm, into our own flesh. By us not preparing ourselves for that future is economically insane. So preparing yourself and preparing your city, it's not bunker mentality. Some people say, it's bunker mentality, just like to think about yourself. It's reacting to the context in which we live. And if you deploy strategies, that are replicable, that means you can do it and others can do it and everybody will win. So you're actually enabling a win-win situation. You're enabling a positive sum game. If you deploy strategies that are not replicable, you build more conflicts into the system, the likelihood of you succeeding is lower because you're actually using solutions that may run into the other solutions and be in conflict. And you also obviously diminish the possibilities of others to succeed, which means conflict. So it's absolutely manageable. But if you don't go where you need to go, you may not get there. That's kind of seems kind of obvious. So it's kind of silly to have to say that, but I'm still saying it because we're not going where it would be good for us to go. Not fast enough, not at the scale. I mean, there's technologies available, ideas are available, it's possible. And possibly we often choose resignation because that's our easy way out. I can't do anything. But what's the benefit? What's the upside really? Because there's no benefit in not preparing yourself for the future you can anticipate.
Yes, thank you. We will definitely check your website, Global Footprint Network website. Yeah. And what would be your message to the visitors of the Planet Budapest 2021 Sustainability Expo?
Probably already gave a lot of messages, but I mean, the basic message I would say is resource security is quite significant. We talk about the footprint. People ask me, journalists ask me, what do you do about your footprint? How have you reduced your footprint? as if it was a moral question, you know, so, oh, are you a good person or a bad person? So perhaps a little bit to shock them, I'm not sure, but I tell them I've never reduced my footprint. What I do is I increase my resource security, which of course is the same thing, but it's just to illustrate that I'm investing in my own ability to operate well without depending on excess amount of resources. And through that, I feel more safe. So it's not a good deed just for humanity and humanity, what has humanity ever done for me type, you know, it's the other way around. It's actually, it's a good investment in yourself. So message here, like, wow, actually, you have much more skin in the game, as they say in English. You know, you're in the game. You're not just a visitor kind of looking at from the outside what's happening. You're in the game. You're in the game, and what's good for you. I do invite you, I say again, go to data.footprintnetwork.org and check out the world. Second thing, if you want to do another thing, sleep enough, because it's about good decisions. With a rested brain, you will make better decisions. And currently, we don't make decisions that really serve us that well. Think about the implication for you. You know, what's the impact? If you want a third thing, if that's not enough yet, here, don't say should anymore. If you say, we should do this and we should do that, you basically just indicate it's not going to happen. I want to know, what do you want? What solutions do you love? That's the question.
Yes, thank you very much. We will have to think about these possible solutions. And then, what about your own footprint?
Yeah.
Do you calculate it? And I know you travel a lot, and you just said that.
Of course, so I answered a bit like, what about my footprint? So do I track my footprint? Of course, I do look at my footprint, and it's kind of interesting to compare yourself, and that's why I think of what's my resource exposure, etc. And so please do it yourself as well if you want. And at the same time, I also want to emphasize, resource security is really essential. So if you don't prepare yourself, your community, your city, or your country for that reality, it's not that good. And of course, as an organization, also a big part of my footprint is flying, not that much. And Zoom is great. We don't need to fly that around that much. And I think every time, like, it takes resources. That's one part. If we as an organization use more resources than the change that we can produce in the world, then we should just close down our organization. Then we are net negative, you know. I still see the world like often like kind of we are not taking these issues very seriously. And so how do we help people see that they have a stake in it? And I think if we start too much, and so that's kind of why I kind of deflect a little bit too quickly, just to look at the footprint, your own calculator, people quickly fall into this trap of thinking, this is all about suffering and sacrifice. It's not for me, you know? So yeah, it's important to understand where you're at. And is it replicable? And I know my lifestyle is not replicable worldwide. You know, it's not replicable worldwide. I bicycle a lot. Like, I actually don't need a car. We have a car, but we don't really need. It's just a luxury if we want to go on a beautiful kind of countryside walk or something, you know. But on everyday life, I can use my bicycle, etc. Not eating that much food. I have one child, for example, you know, so that makes a big difference as well. Anyhow, so but in the end, it's really a much deeper challenge for us, for society. How can we operate? And that's why we call it One Planet Prosperity. It's relevant for you, your company, your city, your country. Are you getting prepared for the future you can anticipate?
Thank you. Can I have one more question, just to finish up? And that's about your future, maybe plans, or how do you see the work that's ahead of you, to the extent that we can know or see it, if I'm understood well?
You mean the plan? What like how things will develop ecologically, or what we are trying to do around that, or?
Yeah. In this respect, yeah.
What we do, like as
what you
network?
do?
But
yeah.
One big thing that we do every year, and you may have heard of, is called Earth Overshoot Day.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, so that's the day, like from January 1st to that day, and then in 2021 it was July 29th. Humanity has used as much as Earth can renew in the entire year. So that day changes every year depending on the resource consumption. And then a big thing that we also do around that, we call it this year 100 Days of Possibility. Please visit it as well, 100daysofpossibility.org. You can go and see that. Yeah. Looking at kind of saying, yeah, and what is possible to move the date? How can we move the date? And there's so many possibilities. And we try to overwhelm people with the abundance of possibilities of saying, there's so many things around that are possible and actually also even economically viable. So it's not that we lack of ideas what to do. I think we lack of believing it's relevant or necessary for ourselves. We see it just as a noble cause. Are we willing to be nice enough to humanity? Which is of course nice, but it's not. It's much more profound. For people in Budapest, it's much more the question: is Budapest committed to its own success? That's the question for me. And that's what I don't see. That's what surprises me.
Thank you very much, Mathis.
You're most welcome, and thanks for watching.